Oh, I see what you're doing. We'll try not to laugh at
I'll have to tell you that this means
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Newsmaker event at the National Press Club. My name is Mike Smith, and I'm a reporter, columnist for Huffington Post. I also have my own business in Reston, Virginia, MSVD. Thanks for coming. We have a great speaker today, Gary Shapiro, President and CEO of the Consumer Electronics Association. And he's here to talk about technology, innovation, electronics business, a little bit about legislative agenda, I suspect, and to give us some updates on what's happening technologically in our industry, in the tech industry. I've known Gary for some time. I've been to the last 10 years of consumer electronics shows out of 14, I suspect, and was there this year with the media hordes that thousands of journalists and bloggers, and we think you probably had bloggers outnumbering print at that point at the show. So there were tweets and updates almost every second from different events at the CES show, the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas. We're going to get into some of the debate and comments. I'll have a few questions. We're going to open the floor for questions from journalists first, working journalists, particularly those on deadline or covering for the tech trades. There is a short video that provides, I think, a bit of a tone piece as to how electronics is doing and what tech innovations we can expect, and how technology can really lead us out of the recession. And that's the topic of today's Newsmakers. Newsmakers are held usually at the Press Club 10 a.m., 12 noon. There are numbers of lists of those in our record or on the wire. You can see this online as well. Photographs and others will be available at thepressclub.org. Gary Shapiro is President and CEO of the CEA, the U.S. trade association that represents 2,200 consumer electronics companies, and owning and producing the world's largest trade show for consumer technology, the International CES, which really does take all of Vegas. It's a citywide, convention-wide conference. He's an active leader in the development, launch, and marketing of HD TV, and part of what I'd like to do is congratulate you on the implementation of high-def TV this week. Well done. From our understanding, it was extremely successful, without pandering, because I'm trying to be Huffington here, it was extremely successful consumer education campaign, transition. We're understanding that after the first day, with some people having questions, second day, call-ins at call centers and web questions were down to negligible. People really got it, they understood it, and they made the change. So congrats. He's been on that group for a long time and testified before Congress on HDTV and other tech issues over 20 times. He also co-founded and chaired the HDTV model station and served as a leader in the Advanced Television Test Center that helped support this technology. He's a charter inductee to the Academy of Digital TV Pioneers. Gary has also been the chairman of the Home Recording Rights Coalition. He's held many industry expo positions and honors and awards for the CES show, including receiving the highest honor, the Pinnacle Award from IAEM, International Association of Expo Managers, I believe that is. He's been on the board of visitors of George Mason, our region's largest university, one that's dedicated to tech. He's been on the Commonwealth's Commission on IT and been recognized by the EPA in helping reduce ozone. Prior to joining the association, Gary was at the law firm of Squire, Sanders & Dempsey. He worked on Capitol Hill as an assistant to a member of Congress. He received a law degree from Georgetown Law Center and his Phi Beta Kappa from SUNY Binghamton. My first reporting job was at the Binghamton Evening Press, so I know that town pretty well. I had a little staff car to drive around in at age 23. Anyway, I'm glad to be moderating. We'll have Gary come up and tee up the video, a few words and remarks on tech innovation, questions that I'll tee up, and then questions from you. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you for that kind introduction. It's very gracious. First, we're going to show a video, so if you could run the video.
All of us must recognize that education and innovation will be the currency of the 21st century.
I'm David Rodarte with Nuvo Technologies, and I am a member of the innovation movement, and I need you to join too.
Hi, I'm Jim Hamilton, Vice Chairman of PowerMat. You know, there are many ways of being a patriot. Being a patriot is being an innovator. So if you would join me in joining the innovation movement,
that would be fantastic.
Hi, I'm Skip West. I'm founder and president of Max Innovations. I'm delighted and honored to be one of the founding members of the innovation movement. I hope you'll join us on this critical path for our country, for our economy, and for our world.
Hi, I'm Jim Braun, President and CEO of Dual Electronics. In the history of business in the United States, innovation has always been the driving engine. Innovation creates growth, it creates jobs. In the high technology businesses, like those of the members of the CEA, innovation is at the heart of what we do. That's why I'm part of the new innovation movement, and I'd like you to come and join us as well.
Well, good afternoon. Today, the Consumer Electronics Association, which is the voice of the consumer technology industry, launches the CEA Innovation Movement. The movement is a unique grassroots campaign. It brings together the tech sector along with American consumers in unified support of public policies that promote and protect innovation. The goal of the innovation movement is very simple. It's to make the initiatives that keep our economy the most dynamic in the world at the forefront of every policy debate, whether on taxes, trade, or other issues. The mission of the Consumer Electronics Association is also very simple. It's to grow the consumer electronics industry. And that happens best when we innovate. You know, I'd like to recognize there's an innovative company in the back represented Bob Stribble, one of our board members, HD Radio, right in Maryland. Also John Godfrey of Samsung. These are innovative companies, and some are multinational, some are local, but they're innovating here and they're selling consumers here. Our over 2,000 member companies are American businesses, and what they do is they share a passion for technology. They're big and they're small, they're manufacturer and retailer, installer and service provider, and they come together to our association because they are Americans and they're focused on innovation. Innovation is the backbone of our economy. The CEA Innovation Movement will help speed our economic recovery by supporting policies that encourage the innovative spirit of Americans. Our members are joined with a common view, and one of those views is that a healthy U.S. economy is a prerequisite to the future of our nation, and that government policies must create an environment that is favorable for innovation. Today we see some threats. Our economy is clearly struggling. This in turn is inhibiting investments in innovation, which paradoxically is precisely what is needed to turn around the economy. In other words, the future of innovation in this nation and the economy are closely linked. Let's not sugarcoat it. Our rising national deficit is an obstacle to a sound economic future. We asked the noted market research firm Zogby to survey Americans on innovation and the economy. Over 3,000 Americans responded, and Zogby found that 92% of Americans, that's 9 out of 10 Americans, believe that our growing deficit will hurt our ability to remain a world leader. Making things worse, some policymakers are now suggesting actions that would decrease free trade, restrict foreign investment, increase taxes, and allow unions to form without a private vote or management knowledge. Innovation is the solution to the economic challenges we face, and innovation is what the tech sector and our membership is about. Our products and services not only to grow the economy, but they also provide the tools for solving some of the most pressing problems in our nation. The CEA Innovation Movement is a community of citizens who advocate a connected series of public policy positions tied to the common theme of innovation. The priorities of the innovation movement are those measures that, if adopted, will grow our economy and allow businesses to deliver the benefits of technology to consumers. We'll measure the success of this movement by using our innovation checklist on policies that become law. The innovation checklist asks 6 questions about a proposal. Only if these questions are answered in the affirmative should policymakers support it as advancing our innovation-driven economy. Here's the 6 questions that each policymaker should look at when evaluating legislation. First, does it create American jobs? Second, does it spur new technology? Third, does it encourage the best and the brightest to come to the United States and stay here? Fourth, does it reward innovation and investment? 5th, does it promote exports? And 6th, does it foster productivity and energy efficiency? The fundamental question behind this checklist is whether the United States will be the destination of choice when it comes to the creation of jobs and investment. For decades, America has attracted the best and the brightest, and financial capital from around the world. And with this talent and capital, we have flourished to create the most dynamic companies in the world. But there are no guarantees for our future. Our policies must attract businesses that want to create jobs here, and they must believe that America is where they can prosper. The specific agenda supported by the innovation movement and those policies meet these 6 checklist items. For example, free trade encourages innovation. If you can obtain the best products quickly, easily, and at a reasonable price from anywhere in the world, you can innovate in design, marketing, and distribution. Free trade between countries means both nations benefit. Where would Apple be if it wasn't able to buy components, the best components from around the world? And so the CEA innovation movement supports bilateral and multilateral trade agreements. We support giving the President of the United States back the authority he has had to negotiate free trade agreements, which can be voted by Congress with an up or down vote. At the same time, the CEA innovation movement opposes special Buy American provisions that are opposed by President Obama, as they artificially raise prices for products and they invite retaliation by our trading partners. This is particularly harmful given that we must remember that 95% of the consumers in the world are not Americans. They live outside the U.S. Similarly, our immigrant nation used to attract the best and the brightest from around the world. Intel, Qualcomm, and other great technology companies were started by first-generation immigrants. Half of all Silicon Valley IT companies were started by immigrants. Our consumer survey revealed that 75% of Americans think that entrepreneurs, not the government, drive innovation. The CEA innovation movement believes innovation stems from attracting the brightest people in the world. Our policy should be attracting rather than discouraging intellectual capital. Our nation faces energy and environmental challenges, and climate change is a concern. We have to be innovative in this approach as well. The CEA innovation movement supports clear disclosure of how much energy every product uses, so consumers can make wise purchasing choices when they're buying products. Our industry is the largest contributor of Energy Star products, which use less energy. These are voluntary, industry-created, market-oriented programs, and they use industry-led standards, and they highlight and they talk about energy efficiency. This compares to government just coming in and saying this is how it shall be, which stifles innovation, reduces choice, and limits product features and services. Innovative companies must be flexible and fast to act. Such action is inconsistent with a union environment which has rigorous rules on hiring, job definitions, and conditions of work. Card check, this is what this proposal is not affectionately known as in Congress, would allow unions to form without management even knowing and without a private ballot by workers. It denies innovative companies the flexibility they need to create new jobs. Government bureaucrats should not be empowered to make binding business decisions after negotiations between the employer and the union. Such government intervention in the private sector replaces entrepreneurs and innovators with functionaries who have no experience running businesses. By a 2-to-1 margin, Zogby poll respondents said that a union environment hinders innovation. This is especially true in the fast-paced technology industry, where you probably couldn't name one technology company that's unionized and innovative. A competitor has to have the flexibility to turn on a dime to meet new opportunities or threats. Card check is the ultimate innovation killer, and the CEA innovation movement will oppose that proposal. Innovative companies also need to attract funding. Funding is hindered by unclear and potentially large legal liability. Punitive patent laws, high statutory damages for innocent copyright infringement, and a court system motivating lawyers to file lawsuits reduces investments in U.S. companies and therefore discourage innovation. Similarly, we have to protect First Amendment and fair use rights. in the digital age to preserve consumer freedoms. We need to protect the creative spirit and allow advancement and trying new things in this amazing age we live in. Our products and the content they access are not only good for our own consumers, but they actually export our culture and ideals, and they do influence other nations. The CEA innovation movement, of course, is committed to strong copyright laws, which also ensure consumer access to legal, non-infringing products by preserving the so-called Sony Betamax case, the standard which said you can sell products if they have significant non-infringing uses. To remain a leader in the global economy, we also need broadband, and we need it ubiquitously. The CEA innovation movement supports a national broadband strategy that encourages investment in affordable and competitive high-speed infrastructures. Although broadband service providers should have flexibility to manage their networks, they must not block or degrade consumers' access to lawful applications, content, and services, or prohibit the usage of any specific non-harmful devices. The CEA innovation movement takes an unwavering pro-innovation stance on all these public policy issues, but we're also maintaining an overall look at the health of the U.S. economy. No factor threatens the national economy more than the ballooning federal deficit. The projected deficit this year would beat the prior record set in 1943 by more than threefold, even putting the comparison in inflation-adjusted dollars. The federal deficit is a lead weight which will increasingly be a drag on the U.S. economy, and the U.S. economic health is vital to innovation. The CEA innovation movement will not support government actions that reward bad behavior or prop up failed companies or industries. More, we will oppose new taxes on investment, tariffs, and other actions which restrict innovation and trade. We will urge Congress to help balance the budget in responsible ways, such as cutting industry subsidies and reducing spending. The U.S. has some of the world's largest and most innovative companies, yet our tax laws discourage companies from returning that income to the United States by charging higher taxes than the country where the income is earned. The return of this capital will actually help our economy. Similarly, proposals to further burden this income through new taxes would discourage companies from domiciling in the U.S. and would encourage companies to move their headquarters to other countries. I just returned from a trip to Europe. I had in mind during my visit that many Americans view Europe as the way that we should be. That's Americans say, let's be like Europe. They're our model for change. We have Europe envy. And it does make sense, but in some ways, but also I think should require some skepticism by all of us in this room. Europe is definitely greener. It has walkable communities, usable public transportation, and greater fuel efficiency, and certainly produces less waste than we do. It has a wider social net with health care, and it's arguably more egalitarian. Most countries are heavily unionized, and higher income citizens are taxed at higher rates. But Europe is also challenged in ways we are not. Its multiple languages, numerous holidays, work stoppages, and class systems based on birth create tough economic barriers to American-style creativity, investment, and innovation. The great irony is that while we're looking at Europe as a model for America, European businesses and government officials are looking at us, and they're trying to figure out how to emulate or even thwart our American advantage. They see a future of economic opportunity spurred by digitalization and related technologies. And they're right for wondering how America has succeeded while they have not. If you think about the most important digital companies that are American, especially in the internet space, Amazon, Apple, Cisco, eBay, Facebook, Google, Intel, and Microsoft, Qualcomm, Twitter, these are the hot names which today dominate the digital revolution. How many European companies could be listed with these American digital leaders? I can only think of one, and that's Nokia. European officials are looking to American ways for answers. When I was in France, the Minister of Education announced at our conference that France would require every high school graduate to be proficient in English and to have basic IT skills. Amazing. And yet, other European officials are murmuring about challenging Google's search dominance and what they call Apple's closed system. The European Commission just imposed a $1.5 billion antitrust fine against Intel which even exceeded the record fines that it imposed earlier on Microsoft. These are protectionist measures. What Americans don't appreciate and the Europeans don't understand is that the dominant American success in innovation stems from our unique DNA and culture here. Every American generation tries to build up something better for its progeny, for its children. We want our children to have a better life. That's what unites us as Americans. And we succeed by hard work and by attracting the best and the brightest in the world who also want a better life. That's where we came from. Many of our most successful technology companies were founded by first-generation immigrants who were attracted to the opportunity here. More, our legal and immigration system encourages diversity and allows anyone with a better idea to succeed. Our tax system allows easy capital formation and investment and rewards those who create jobs and those who innovate and provide a desirable service or product. So while America looks to Europe as a model, Europeans are looking here. So let's hope that we don't trade our successful innovative system for Europe's less innovative egalitarianism. And with today's launch of the CEA innovation movement, we urge our national leaders to support the innovation that makes us the greatest nation on earth. Our citizens are worried that we will lose our global economic and technology leadership. Only 13%, that's about a little more than 1 out of 10, Zogby poll respondents said that the U.S. will be the most innovative country in the next decade. These are our own citizens talking, and they are very pessimistic about our innovation future. Now, of course, not everyone will join the CEA innovation movement, nor will everyone support its agenda. There are those that believe that innovation is too disruptive, and that the change that innovation brings is too risky. To them I say, technology and innovation are by definition disruptive. But in good times and bad, innovation drives us forward. The nation's transition to digital television came to a successful conclusion last week. I do take pride in having worked on it personally, and as do a lot of people in this room. For the last 20 years I've worked on it. That has been the most significant technological transformation our country has ever seen in a combination of government and industry working together. We had some very clear and simple goals. We wanted to ensure we had a uniquely American system, and in the end, in the days of the transition, we wanted to make sure that every American knew that this transition was coming. We succeeded. About 100% of Americans were aware of the transition. And while certainly there were people who waited till the last minute, and there were many, many naysayers along the way, by all accounts, the transition was enormously successful. It's not only given us the joy of HDTV, but it's freed up some extremely valuable spectrum for new products. It returned $20 billion to the U.S. government, and it's moved us forward as a nation. Now, my wife and others have said, what's next after HDTV, Gary? You've done this. What's next? Well, to me, what I'm passionate about is this innovation movement, and the reason is it's our nation's future is hanging in the balance. It's a broader context, it's a bigger picture, but what has made us great and what we've all assumed growing up here, and those of you that are immigrants, I welcome you, but you have helped us make us great, is it will always be that way. We'll always have something better for our kids in the future. What we're hearing from Zogby and what we know talking to each other is that's no longer the case. We can't take it for granted as a nation. So this innovation movement is something bigger in a sense than even the consumer electronics industry, which is why we are reaching out. Now you're going to see it in different ways. In the coming weeks, the top priority for the movement will be trade. Congress must pass pending trade agreements with Colombia, Panama, and South Korea. These agreements correct existing trade imbalances that penalize U.S. businesses exporting to these three countries. For example, U.S. businesses pay almost $2 million per day to export products to Colombia. That's $2 million in taxes or tariffs we're paying the Colombian government. They go away under this free trade agreement. And they'll boost our GDP by $2.5 billion a year. The Korean Free Trade Agreement would add $10 billion to our GDP. And the Panama Free Trade Agreement would allow our U.S. companies to bid on the expansion of the Panama Canal, which is the biggest construction project in the South and North America that's just about to begin. And the U.S. companies cannot bid on it today because we don't have a free trade agreement with Panama. Now, one thing excites me most about the launch of the CEA innovation movement. When I travel the country and I talk about some of these issues and I talk about how great technology is and I advocate for these policies, People keep coming out to me outside our industry and say, what can I do to help? What can I do? You guys are on the right side of all these issues. I believe in America, I believe in innovation, and I believe in these policies. Now we have an answer. You could join our movement. So we've created an outlet for those Americans who support innovation, who want a vehicle for urging their elected officials to support pro-innovation policies, and we'll continue to do with this movement what we've done since 1924 when we were formed as the Radio Manufacturers Association. We'll promote technology and sound public policies that make this nation the world leader in innovation. So we have an innovation movement. We signed up with a very soft launch, just going to people in our industry. 14,000 people already on our website. And today, with this announcement, we're going live with our website to the broader public. I would welcome your questions now, and I invite you to be part of this movement.
Great job. Thank you very much for your remarks. I'm going to focus on 3 areas: trade, debt, and tech innovation, or the notion of risk around tech innovation. I was lucky to be at a conference recently with the Northern Virginia Tech Council, where you're on the board. You spoke a few months ago, and it was a little earlier in our recessionary times, a little more dire. You had rousing applause for just about everything, except there seemed to be an undercurrent of maybe buy American, because that seems to come up during depressions and recessions. We get a little bit protectionist. So what I wanted to ask is, has the administration been loud enough on free trade? And why do you think Congress refused to pass earlier the South American country free trade agreements that would have allowed the cuts and tariffs? And also your members at CEA, how are they trying to engage more on being free traders?
That's a great question. I was a speaker of the Titan of Technology, the Northern Virginia Technology Council. I didn't notice that, but that's a good observation. And I have to admit, I had some trepidation going there because that is generally a government procurement audience. I mean, that's the people who sell to the U.S. government. I certainly didn't get any pushback orally on that, so I didn't hear one comment, but maybe they didn't clap as enthusiastically. But I'd say the tech industry is united on Buy American. And I even, I'm not aware of any case when actually the tech industry has advocated for Buy American. When it was being discussed as part of the stimulus package, even the software community, which is so dominated by American companies, was very much against the Buy American provision. And think about it. As they said, we could win every procurement because we have the best software here in the United States. But if you have Buy American provisions in the stimulus package, then other countries are going to have Buy their country provisions, and that's exactly what has happened. The Buy American provisions in the stimulus package, not for software, just for some big construction stuff, have already caused a good portion of Canada to have Buy Canada provisions, and U.S. companies have been blocked from selling all these great exports to Canada and vice versa. So it's had exactly the type of retaliatory impact we indicated. Now, in terms of what the Obama administration has, I think President Obama has been terrific on Buy American. He opposed it in the stimulus package. Was that a reason for him not to sign the bill? I don't know, but it's certainly he's been speaking out against the Buy American provisions. They are definitely a very, very dangerous type of thing which promote retaliation. In terms of the free trade agreements, why has there not been action? Why has Congress been? You're right. A recession, the danger of a recession is not only that it hurts real people economically, it forces politicians sometimes to do things they know better about. They know that protectionist policies are not in the long-term economic interests of the country. And some of them have responded. I wouldn't say that there hasn't been an administration in my career that's been wrong on trade. And I've been here since the early 80s. So Democrats and Republicans presidents, from Clinton and President Obama, as well as the Bushes and Reagan, have all been very strong on free trade because they think it's in the national interest. Congress, on the other hand, especially perhaps this Congress, has, and the one before it, did not pass the free trade agreements with Panama or Colombia, in part because Speaker Pelosi herself has held them up. And I think that the unions have been very, very strong in asking her not to move those agreements. And I think that's been very unfortunate and not in the national interest.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. And on the issue, some of these I'm actually taking from the NVTC talk. You were really vehement about debt and about debt service, about the hole that we're digging for ourselves in the area of national debt. You said then the bailout was done with very little discussion. We haven't seen this much debt since 1943. Our debt now is triple what it would have been then in real dollars. and this debt will threaten our very way of life. And then you commented that long term that we should be investing in education, but these kinds of bailout and government programs aren't healthy for the recovery. Just comment a little more on the debt service and how you think maybe we can, as we did 10 years, 15 years ago, get out of debt.
You know, it's very easy for someone from industry to come in and tell government you shouldn't be in debt, and it's sometimes a disingenuous position. I don't think the Consumer Electronics Association is in that position. We have never, ever once asked the government to spend money on our industry that I can recall in my history. So we come here, I think, with clean hands, and it's the position of most of our members that I talk to that they are concerned, as is obviously the American public, that the debt level has gotten phenomenally and excessively high. And you can't just look at this administration and this Congress and say they're accountable for that alone. I mean, this is a trend in the history that has been apparent. We've been spending like it's a rainy day when it was actually very bright and sunny out. And I think as a nation, we've made some huge mistakes. And I think we're compounding them now by the level of debt. The Obama administration promise of getting out to, you know, they say they'll half the deficit, this record deficit of 2009 by the end of the administration. That's a very, very excessively modest goal in my view. I think that the spending is just such a high point that it's gotten to the point that any American born, you know, you start, that new baby is born with I think it's a 5 or 6 figure debt figure on his head or her head immediately. So what we're doing is we're stealing from the next generation. And it's not, I was never a deficit hawk until a couple of years ago, until I started looking at the numbers and understanding. And then they've gotten, just this last 9 months, so excessive. It's just beyond believable. We're borrowing more than, we're about 90% of GDP now. I mean, it's gotten absurd. And what's keeping us in line, in a sense, is that we've borrowed it from a lot of Asian countries. Now, I'm not, you know, they're not going to cash in the chips tomorrow, we hope, but there's no question, and I have an economics degree, but any economist will say the same thing, that it's unsustainable, and that it can only lead to 2 things, high inflation and a very weak dollar. A weak dollar means that imports become very, very expensive. It also means that, and we're starting to see it already, we're starting to see it as average Americans are cutting back on their own debt. I mean, there's a lot of things we used to take for granted that are now become luxuries. All of us are doing that in our own lives, because all of us have to meet our own budgets, and that the government has to do the same thing. You know, the problem with the deficit discussions is that they're excessively boring, and no one wants to hear about it. And there's a lot written about it, and Congress hasn't done it. Now, what CEA is doing, CEA is concluded in a sense that this is a very important issue, and there's different ways to address it. Obviously, it's incumbent for Congress to address it. If Congress can't do it, there is bipartisan legislation which Congress could pass, and it's up there, and it's Democrats and Republicans are supporting it, which basically says, Congress, you can't do this. Do what you did with base closures. Give it to an independent, bipartisan commission, give them a year to study it, they come back, they give something to Congress, and they vote it up or down. And you have to not only deal with the debt, the deficit for the discretionary programs, but also for Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, which it is so serious and so large. I mean, just a few weeks ago, Congress cut back the deficit time for Social Security by 10 years. I mean, this is going to be out of money in the next couple of years. So, I mean, how many people in this room think they're actually going to ever get a Social Security check? I don't see any hands. So, what does that tell you? It's you know, we're not stupid. We know there's no money left.
Can't spend your way out of debt, I suppose.
No.
Now, another note here, the average or advanced technology worker makes about $78,000 a year. We're curious about worker retraining, particularly in light of Detroit's implosion, looking at some new technology and innovation where workforce issues will come up. As you start this program on innovation, where's there a role maybe for worker retraining? We've heard the opinion on unions, but let's stick to the kind of education and support for average workers, blue collar, and moving into better technology fields through education.
You know, that's a tougher issue for me. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of talent in the United States. As many of you know, I have a home in Detroit, and I'm there almost every week, and I see firsthand the type of workers we have in Detroit that are phenomenal workers and highly trained. My wife ran an ad on Craigslist to get someone to organize our garage for minimum wage, and we were inundated with hundreds of replies, and we have this guy with a master's degree in engineering who designed the inside of the Corvette cleaning out our garage today. I mean, it makes you want to cry, actually, to see these highly skilled people, highly trained people, and they have nothing to do. So we have skilled people. In terms of education and retraining, obviously we have, what Americans I think unites us is we have this, we work hard, we work really hard generally as Americans, and we're highly trained and we're smart. What I don't think we want to become is the factories that are in China. I don't think we want to do piecework over and over again. That is not the American way. We have to do upper level trade stuff. Some of that's in factories, and some of it, which I personally think we're losing, are some of the skilled trades even, whether it's plumbers, electricians, carpenters, auto mechanics. These are important things as well, which we can't lose sight of. Not everyone can be an IT worker. So in terms of the government role in that, I think the government has a role. I don't think it's going to be CEA's place to say exactly what that is or who should be trained how. Education is a multifaceted thing. Clearly we have to do better with math and science and basic science training for everyone. But in terms of how that money is spent and what to do, there's plenty of people with opinions in that, so I won't give one.
Maybe some public-private partnerships along the way. So I have to talk about the show, the CES show, and then we'll open it up to questions, and we would like working journalists first, please. So CES had 15 to 20% fall off in attendance this year. I sure didn't see it. The place was packed, you couldn't get anywhere, and I spent most of my time at the Microsoft booth, and they had 500 people at any given moment. But it seemed that, all things considered, it was still a good show. What do you think will bode for next year in terms of attendance? And innovations we saw this year were 3D, obviously HDTV, we saw new devices, mobile devices, yeah. We saw how everyone's going to use Twitter now, I suppose, and handhelds, and a lot in the terms of mobile transmission, mobile entertainment. So what do you think bodes for next year, and how about attendance?
For those that don't attend the CES, it's something to behold. I first attended when I was outside counsel to the association, and I was overwhelmed. I didn't know something like that could exist. You basically see literally, well, there's about 2,700 companies exhibiting, and about 28 football fields worth of exhibit space, and thousands of people, and each company is showing the image they want to the world, and it's the most important technology event in the world, and attracts people from all over the world, including about 25,000 people from outside the United States, and they all gather in one place, and it's like the perfect marketplace. It's exciting because it shows innovation, it shows competition, it shows creativity, and everyone's in one location. Certainly, the CES has ranged in size from 70,000 people to, at one point it was 150,000. It goes up and down depending on the economy, depending on how strict our admission procedures are. We actually strengthened our admission procedure. We started charging for the first time for pre-registered people last year, and that coincided with the recession. We knew there'd be fewer people, which was part of the request of our board, is that we have fewer people, and we certainly ended up with 113,000 people independently audited, which makes it the largest event in the Americas. Our board met, and we have this tradition, some of our board members here know that, on the third day of the show at 4 o'clock we go around and every board member speaks for 1 minute and they give their impressions. And this was the most positive I've ever seen. One guy said, we had 400 meetings set up before the show. 400 meetings occurred. That's never happened. It's usually too crowded, people miss meetings. We had others who said, this is the size we want to be. So our goal for 2010, January in Las Vegas, is to have about 110,000 people. Now the fact is we can't control the number of people that come, because we could tell you how many people are pre-registered, but how many ultimately come is up to people coming. And it's a function of other things, it's a function of weather, it's a function of hotel rates, illness, you name it. So we'll probably be around 110,000 plus or minus 10%. Probably the Zogby poll estimates are more accurate than my predicting show attendance. Okay, I could talk about the CES a lot, by the way, in terms of what we will see. One of the big things that we will see is that as most people know, Apple has pulled out of Macworld, and we have created a separate portion of our show called iLounge, which is gathered. We thought we'd have a few thousand square feet. We had to triple it to 12,000, and now we're at 25,000 square feet of exhibit space. And we've also had a very good turnout in terms of companies. Most of the major companies are in. Some of the smaller ones, and we could see this in the economy, they're going out of business, or they just can't decide. They don't have the money. It's a tough economy out there. Best Buy announced their earnings today, and although their sales were up, probably due to Circuit City going under, their profits were down. So it's tough out in the consumer electronics environment, but there's so many great things. One of the great announcements at CES was the Palm Pre. That got a lot of excitement. But in the handheld world, there's tremendous things happening out there. So there's so many different categories of the show, whether it's location-based devices or in the mobile video area, that is extraordinarily hot. 3D television, so many great things happening. But sometimes, oftentimes, companies don't tell us what they're going to do. And not only that, they themselves often don't know because they're working to get that prototype or model out. So people think I know a lot more than I do before the show, because I really don't.
Let's open up to media questions first, please.
Gary, could you elaborate on antitrust enforcement in the European Union and if that constitutes trade protection in the tech sector?
Well, in a sense, I'm an observer. I see Microsoft, one of the great American companies, hit with a fine of over $1 billion, which was a record. Then you see Intel hit with a $1.5 billion fine, and you know that it's going to the tax coffers of the European Union. And frankly, the European Union as a legislative body is often doing things which are very harmful to U.S. companies. So it's like you're being taxed, your best companies are paying these fines to basically hurt your companies more and support the infrastructure of the European Union. Now, I love Europe. I love going there, but it just grates me as an American citizen to see our dominant companies. I was an antitrust lawyer. I can tell you that in the area of monopolization, which is what they're being accused of, the law is not clear. I think it's a basic legal principle that we should support as a country and our government should support, is that you have the right to know whether or not you're breaking the law. What kind of law is it if you don't know that you're breaking it? And in these cases, without coming into specific Intel or Microsoft, it just seems wrong that you have these huge fines and no one really knows whether they're breaking the law. And if U.S. companies are the ones complaining, which could be the case, then we have U.S. courts. This is an inter-family battle. We should be fighting out in the U.S. So, I look at Google, I look at Apple, I look at Intel, I look at Microsoft, I look at HP in the printer area. I look at a lot of great tech companies. They've done something very innovative. They've created something. And there's a very fine line when no one knows what it is between being a phenomenally great competitor and being an illegal monopolist where you pay these incredible fines. So to me, that's an area of the law where, if I was the U.S. government, I'd be behind U.S. companies and I'd be screaming loudly about these things. Every other country in the world, and this has amazed me about all the dealings with Microsoft, every other country in the world would want Microsoft to be headquartered there. They'd want Google, they'd want Intel, they'd want Apple. They'd want these companies that we have. And I think it's incumbent upon the government of the United States to protect the companies that choose to do business in the United States and have employees there. And so I am not going to get into the legal merits of those specific cases, and maybe there was things where laws are broken. I don't know. But what I do know is, as an American, it hurts me to see great American companies paying large penalties to Europe. And you'd like to see the U.S. government behind them.
Other press, otherwise we'll open it up. Okay, other questions?
Gigi, Son, public knowledge.
So Gary, could you talk a little bit about how high statutory damages for copyright infringement hurt innovation and consumers?
Thank you, Gigi, for asking that question.
That's a real toughie.
Well, the thing is, this follows in a remark about you have the right to know if you're breaking the law. Now, in the copyright area, there's been lots of lawsuits brought against companies with innovative products, or lawsuits threatened with, and they go out of business because they just can't even defend a threat and investment capital, because the copyright laws aren't that clear either. The copyright is a constitutional right that says that Congress could give to inventors and creators for a limited period of time, basically a monopoly, to promote science and the useful arts. And the promote science and the useful arts has somehow gotten lost in the first part. So copyright is a term which has been extended 14 times in the last 40 years. So now it's almost perpetual. It's like 100 years, depending on the life of the person. So it's forever, basically. And the damages for infringement, both innocent and willful infringement, have increased dramatically. So if you have an infringement, let's take a device which records off of digital radio. The infringement of that device is you take potentially the number of songs in the entire digital radio world, which is tens of thousands, times the number of devices, times the damages. And you're basically coming up to something which is more than the gross national product in most countries. So if you're a manufacturer, you're not likely to introduce a product like that, because if you are a large company, you could be sued and lose your entire business. If you're a small company, you just can't afford the lawsuit. So, what we think makes sense is basically saying if you are not a willful infringer, meaning if you're not an infringer that you knew you were violating the law and there was no basis for defending your product, then you should only be held liable for the actual damages you're causing the copyright owner. And that's a basic principle which we think is important. So much of the innovation has occurred in the last 10 or 20 years is actually revolved around the ability to take content and shift it in time and place and manage it. Think of your personal video recorder. Think of your MP3 player. Think of all the Apple products, actually. I remember testifying in Congress and trying to defend the legality of the internet because someone in the content industry was calling it the world's largest copying device. Or saying that, it's illegal to pass along someone's email to somebody else and we have to block that because under US law, anytime you write anything down that's your words and original, type it, that's copyrighted. You don't have to file something at the Copyright Office. Every one of you owns copyrighted material. That gives you a certain amount of control, but it doesn't mean that someone should not be allowed to use it. I think copyright goes too far. I mean, when you can't sing happy birthday in a restaurant, which you can't, the restaurant staff may not sing happy birthday to you. I don't know if you knew that. Copyright law has gone too far. Copyright law, unfortunately, is created by copyright owners. There is a huge content industry lobby on one side. On the other side is Gigi Sun and a few other public interest groups, and occasionally the manufacturers when they feel it affects them. But we didn't oppose the extension of the copyright terms or the increasing the penalties. On the other hand, as an American, you have to respect the fact that copyright law is very important. And we agree with the copyright content world on 95% of what they want. It's important that they get paid somehow. And it's important that commercial piracy be penalized and enforced. I think what we disagree on is what consumers can do in their home. If they're doing it in their home and they're not hurting anybody and they're not passing it along to millions of people, why is it wrong? Why is it wrong if you buy a CD that you can't put it on your MP3 player? Why should that be protected? It just doesn't make sense. And there's so many companies which have been put out of business by lawsuits, good companies with good products. But that's a form of innovation which deserves some protection. But having said that, when you go abroad, we export technology and innovation, but we also export our music and our movies and our works of word and of art. And what we are is almost better than anyone else in the world. We are innovators in the United States, and that includes the content community. So I'm happy to defend the content community. I just think that they need some balance and checks. They can't get everything they want, and it has to be more of a balanced approach, and balance is the word. I did a debate last week with a very hostile audience because it was the Copyright Society, basically of the world, and they were meeting. And what I tried to explain to them is by the RIA bringing all these lawsuits and suing 30,000 teenagers in the United States and bankrupting almost every one of them. So they had to drop out of college. They have caused such an extreme situation, and so the kids today really, for the most part, don't respect copyright because they don't believe anything they say. Last week, the Pirate Party in, what country was it? Sweden. So everyone knows this, won 7% of the vote and the right to a seat at the European Union. The Pirate Party advocates no patents, no copyrights, no intellectual property. It's pretty extreme. And my point, but the demographic is about 1/3 of the vote of younger people. Now the truth is, people like me we're all getting older, but I'm getting older quicker than you are. Actually, you're getting older. Whatever. Is I'm going to be gone someday, and those people who voted, 1/3 of them voted for the Pirate Party, are going to be in control soon. And that's a very bad trend. If I was in the content industry, I'd look at that and I'd radically change my approach so I would allow some reasonableness to creep into the discussions. Did you want to add to that, Gigi?
No thanks.
Last week was a big birthday for me that ended in a 0, and when I went to Chuck E. Cheese, they just did happy, happy. They changed the lyrics up a little bit. So what's next for Gary Shapiro? Your wife asked you, now that HDTV is over with, what's next? And so the question becomes, at one of your more recent public speeches, you said if we focus on exports, avoid debt, don't lose on card check, come out of this recession with a strong technology-driven economy. And that sounds like a great bookend or capstone. Would you return to the practice of law, perhaps? Are you considering anything in politics or a way to support our government that needs so much change right now? Personal note.
A personal note?
Yes, sir.
I have to check with my wife and I have to check with Jason as to what I'm allowed to say. No, I have the best job in Washington. I love what I'm doing. I think, I've been blessed by being connected with the most exciting industry of a generation, and that's the technology industry. And it's fabulous to work with it. We're still at the beginning of the digital revolution. I mean, the switch from analog to digital television was a landmark. I mean, there's no question this will go down as a milestone in our history. And it was much smoother than anyone anticipated. But we at CEA and several, again, people are in this room that have worked on these issues. We played it right for 20 years. There's very little I would have done differently there because we knew HDTV would be something that would be good and we'd get there. But it is just the beginning. There's so much coming down in technology, whether it's biometrics or nanotechnology or location-based technology. I mean, there's all these. Think about when you have the internet anywhere you go in a broadband wireless capacity. The new services are going to develop. The new things are going to come up. It's very, very exciting. And I think it's our goal to make sure that consumers have that access to those services and they can get those. So I'm pretty happy. For what it's worth, not that anyone cares except me, I just entered a new contract with my employer, so I'm happy.
Very good.
Am I allowed to say that, Jason?
Congratulations. Well, I think we're going to wrap up here, and then if others have questions, they can just come up and ask Gary. I'm sure he can be here for a few more minutes. This has been a National Press Club Newsmaker event. Our committee chairman is Mark Sheff, who's here, and thanks, Mark, for arranging it, along with the team, Megan, Katie, and others who really helped us pull this off. It was a great crowd. You can read about this on the npc.org, on the wire, and there are additional copies and information of the speech, I'm sure. So this is a National Press Club Newsmaker, and we're adjourned. Thank you.